You're listening to the Woman of Value podcast. You are about to hear the story of a woman who is following her dreams and passions and creating positive change in the world.
I hope to be able to help others, either if they're dealing with any kind of neurological issues or any illness or, life situation where you feel like your power has been taken away and you're at the effect of whatever's happening, that you still have power, you still have choice. I was never going to let my brain injury win. I was never going to give my power over to, well, I have a brain injury, so this is how it has to happen. Every moment of every day, and sometimes 18 times a day, I had to re-choose myself. I had to re-choose my power.
My guest today is Theresa Byrne. She is the founder of InPower, which is a company devoted to helping women take their power back.
Yeah!
She's a nationally recognized self-defense and personal protection specialist. She teaches people how to find their innate power. She's also a 4th degree black belt, and she takes ancient principles and applies them to current day situations, like how to set boundaries, when to say no, and how to stop draining your power. Welcome to the show, Theresa Byrne.
Thank you, Sandy Weiner. I'm so excited to be here. I love everything that you're doing. I love that you're highlighting the value of women. Not only that, giving them a role model, right? We're never taught what does a woman of value look like, and you're doing that.
Yeah, so tell us, what does a woman of value look like to you? Good segue.
Why, thank you, Miss Jones. A woman of value is a woman who has inner confidence. So what does inner confidence mean? Inner confidence means no matter what life throws at us, because we all know life is going to throw some curveballs and crazy fastballs sometimes. Inner confidence is knowing deep in your soul that you can handle it. You can deal with it. You've got the skills, the tools, the access on how to be confident. And if you don't know how to handle a certain situation, like boundaries or difficult conversation or conflict, you're smart enough or you're tapped in enough to go look for help. So a woman of value is also someone who has done the lesson of, I got this all myself. I can handle everything. And you have taken that lesson on and you've moved to, it's okay for me to ask for help.
Wow, I love that. So two reasons. One is, I think when we're in survival mode, we take it all on. And especially if we've surrounded ourselves or been surrounded by people who didn't show up for us. And so we begin to, become these warriors who can do it all. And the truth is that, as we step into thriving, which is what we both really help people with, you learn how to ask for help. You learn who to ask for help.
Key. And who to have in your circle if you've got a lot of takers.
Yes, totally. And I also love what you said about confidence, because we develop confidence through making mistakes, through lots of things that happen to us, but knowing that we have the skill set to feel confident and feel competent. And so there are some skills like setting boundaries that really help us to feel more confident in life. And, you're all about power, inner power and outer power. So how did you become so smart? Like about all?
Lots of trial and error, my friend.
So tell us, take us back to some of those trials that helped you to find your own value.
I came into a whole new understanding of my own power. When I was a kid, I was born in Germany. I was a military brat. We moved to a new place in Colorado, and the kids were very different. They were a little harder. I still felt like a little kid. It was 4th grade, I think we moved there. And I did not fit in. I felt so awkward and so odd. Everywhere we've lived, and if you're a part of a military family, you get pretty good. You're either the shy kid, the funny kid, the quiet, like you take on these roles. And I was always the kid that would go out and be like, hey, everybody, let's have a dance party, or which, is how you would know me now. Hey, let's do this thing. Let's play make-believe. And we moved to this new town in Colorado, and no skills I had worked. It was so different. And I just reconnected with a friend via Facebook, And we were messaging about it. And I asked him, he said, you always stood out. And I asked him, well, what about me stood out? And he said, you were kind and you were always sticking up for the little guy and you were very nice. And what the culture was of this town I moved into, and I'm not hiding the town, it was Colorado Springs, was there were a lot of mean girls, and bullying was kind of a way of life. In Colorado Springs, there were a lot of military families and a melting pot. And kids get very guarded. They got kind of mean. And I wasn't familiar with that. So I stood out, and I also didn't fit in. And so for obvious reasons, I felt uncomfortable, felt awkward, I made up the limiting belief I was not right. I just use air quotes. If you can't see it, I just think it's hilarious to use air quotes. But the first time I protected another kid, because to me, kindness is a huge value. And that is valuing ourselves and valuing others. And when I first protected another kid from a bully, I was probably 8 years old. And I saw this inner, I don't even know what you'd call it, instinct, I guess, to protect others. Now, I say that because I would protect others, but it took me a really long time and a lot of processing on boundaries to learn how to protect me. So there's a big difference between us standing up for someone else, helping other people, having what I call I don't call it, but it's called the mama bear effect, the mama bear instinct. But half of my work has been not only taking that on for myself, but how to teach other women to use that for themselves. Think about it. If you saw somebody being abused, assaulted, yelled at, whatever, you would have this drive to help them, just to stand up for them, to be a support for them. But we oftentimes don't do that for ourselves.
And we oftentimes don't do it for others either. So I want to point out that instinct you had at such a young age was unusual. The fact that you came to a new environment, I moved a lot, so I can relate to coming into a whole strange new group of people. And what I did was try to fit in. I tried to be liked. That was really important to me. And what you did was you stayed true to who you were, and you stood up for the underdog. And so that, your values were so strong at such a young age, which is quite commendable.
Thank you. Do you feel like you took on a role, or did you just morph the different roles as needed?
I think both. I mean, there was a part of me that didn't want to lose who I was. So my biggest move, the biggest change move for me was going into 7th grade. When that's an age where so much is changing and you're really starting to figure out who you are. And so at that time, that's when I remember trying to be liked so much that I was kind of mean to some people. Some of the nerdier kids in the class, I would just be kind of not so nice. And I look back now and I don't like that. I did that, but I understand it was a survival instinct. And I think most people will try to fit in rather than stand out. And to me, I also was taller than most people. I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want to be like noticed. And so what I ended up doing was becoming invisible most of the rest of my life until I became a coach and really started to take a stand for who I was. But this isn't about me. This is about you. So let's
right. But I'm fascinated. Thank you for sharing all of that. There's this thing about therapy. So through college, I studied, my whole goal in college was to help people find out how to live their best life, how to really access their potential. I started in psychology, and I didn't like all the rats and pigeons and stimulus response, and there wasn't enough positive psychology at the time. So I ended up shifting over to communication studies and got concentrations in social work and psychology. But we don't focus enough on this is how I made those decisions. This is how I became invisible. Or for me, I tried so hard to fit in and it just didn't work. Nothing I did worked. So I, eventually just stayed isolated. I read a lot. And I just did my thing. But for most of us, we don't really ever look back at any of that stuff.
Yeah, connecting the dots is so interesting. And one of the things that most people don't know, is that you and I have collaborated on many things in the past. And one of the things that we've done together is teach a boundaries course. And we're going to be launching it again this year. So keep your eyes and ears open. And I love doing that with you because we both have such a passion for empowering people and for helping people have the tools to set those boundaries, to really gain the clarity they need to know and love themselves, which is something that, at a young age, you already had your values. You already had this, I'm a warrior for other people, that value.
Yes.
And the work for you, it sounds like, was to start stepping into, I'm going to take the same stand for myself. So how did that happen?
Oh, through trial and error again. The home life that I had, my father was a very angry man. And for many years, I tried to figure out what he was so mad about. And I just finally gave up. And when I was in college, we worked a lot in social work compartments. It's kind of hard not to bring your own crap if you're learning psychology or social work. And so I started seeing some of my own patterns, and boundaries is like a tiny subset of what we're taught as if you were going to be a therapist. And there's, to me now, as someone who's been using the work for so long, there's a whole, as you know, this whole facet of boundaries and nuances to them. But after college, I shuffled here, I shuffled there. I worked in high-tech sales. I tried to do some things other people were doing, worked in software. None of it was really speaking to my soul. And then I started training in martial arts. And when I started training in martial arts, the owner of the studio came to me and he said, would you be willing to come on as a partner? You've got a background in some marketing and sales. And I thought about it for literally 10 seconds. And it was exactly what my soul, I didn't feel like anything I was doing. I mean, I could market a product, but whose lives was going to be changed because of that? And he said, would you be willing to help take on part ownership of the studio? And at 10 seconds, and I said, absolutely. And for me, when I started seeing the differences in real life or, off the mat, and how we can apply these same concepts. When you're partnered with somebody in a martial arts situation, you're kind to them. You're not cruel. You don't beat them up because they're never going to partner with you again. You've lost a partner. You broke them. There were rules to engagements. Boundaries were a necessary part of it. And it wasn't conflict for conflict's sake. So it was learning how to deal. It was the dance back and forth. And that was a really huge opportunity for me to start learning how to apply this work of what is inner power and how do we take these ancient lessons and move them out into our real lives. And then in 2014, is this my aha moment time?
Yeah. Let's share the big pivotal moment that you went through.
So martial arts. So I became a master instructor. I owned my own studio, and for almost 2 decades, and was there teaching power and inner power and how to have personal power, physical power, all kinds of different power aspects. In 2014, I was in a devastating car accident where I was hit and run into a brick wall. And one of the first big epiphanies, I was put into something called low stimulus, where you're not allowed to have interaction, music, lights, camera, sound. I had to get off of all social media, all of these different pieces. And I had to stop working. And at the time, my martial arts studio was 6,000 square feet, 15 employees. Who's going to pay the bills? I'm single. How is this going to work? And I had this huge breakdown about, if I can't help people, and if I can't show up in this way, and if I can't teach people, what value do I have? Because all of my life, I had built this value of being able to help people learn how to protect themselves, stand up for themselves, get fit, study martial arts. And I couldn't do it. It was taken away from me in that moment. And I had to have this real dark night of the soul. And I asked the universe, or God, or Buddha, or divine, whatever you want to call it, whatever your version of it, like, what good am I? What value do I have? And I got the answer back that, loud and clear, you have value because you are. And I was like, holy crap. I've been trying so hard to prove my value by helping. And it's a good thing, right? I have mission-based, just like you are, but at what cost? And I realized, wow, okay. So my aha moment, I'm valuable just because I am.
Yeah, that's powerful. I can see how emotional you got when you told it. Yeah. Yeah, it's there are that's an extreme case of I have to reevaluate my life. Everything I stood for, everything that I've known to be is now different. And what's left? What's left?
My career was my business taken away in an instant.
And your career was more than a career. It was a way of life. It was your value system. I am here to help others take their power back. I am here to help others take a stand for their power. And I think that this is such an important thing for everybody who's listening to hear, because at the end of life, and most of us don't have these kinds of aha moments like Theresa did, like where we have to face this when we're young. But at the end of life, like we look back and we think, was it enough? Was it my job? Did I work too hard and neglect things that were important? Often when you look at end of life conversations, they involve things like that. And so I think having that reckoning when you're young is such an important thing, because when we grow up, we are often only really worthy of love because of what we do, not because of who we are. And this is some of the deepest work we can do, is to really get clear on our value outside of what we do and inside who we are. And it can sound really kind of confusing and nebulous to anybody listening. So take us a little deeper into what was next for you on this journey of, okay, here's who I am. So then what?
So then what? I had to get kind of broken down to my basest of parts. And I was diagnosed with, the impacts created about six concussions at one time. And so I was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. And knowing that I had value because I was, really helped. And the other point, before I hit the wall, I had asked if I was done, if this was it, because it could have been that I wasn't coming back. And the question that I asked, think of it end of life, because I didn't know if I was going to live or die, was, am I done? Have I done everything I came here to do? And that kind of helped me redefine the next few years. Well, what is it you want to do? What are you still here to do? And while I don't teach martial arts anymore, I can still teach so many of those pieces, the lessons, the internal power, even the physical power. Have you ever seen The Princess Bride?
Oh, yeah.
So I call this my Princess Bride effect. There's a point where Wesley has been mostly dead all day, and he's laying there and he's like, what do we have among our assets? And that's kind of how I felt. And I was like, I still have a really good sense of humor. I'm very lighthearted about all of this. I still know how to teach power and how to help people understand it. And I can still communicate. I'm not in a wheelchair. My speech, I might slur or forget a word, but I can still communicate. Those are the three things I have as my assets. What am I going to do with them? So one of the first things I did was taught myself how to write an ebook, because the doctors told me I'd never teach martial arts again. So that was off the table. I did this wonderful radio interview with a woman on the secrets of setting healthy boundaries in dating. And I took our radio interview and I put it into an ebook. And that was one of my first, it was actually my second, but it was me practicing. So I had to start practicing. And I also want to add this caveat. One of the groups of people that I taught a lot, I taught a neurodiverse group when I was teaching and owning a martial arts school. And we all hate trying something new if we don't know we're going to be good at it. No one likes it. Very few people like it. So I have had to instill in both my students and myself that practicing is part of the progress. So if you're a perfectionist, I'm talking to you. And that is a huge part of you learning. So as I was practicing getting my new work, my new consulting, my new coaching out in the world, I really started to hear the inner bully. And it wasn't necessarily that I heard it, I could feel it. And the inner bully was so present in me that I would freeze a lot when it came to needing to do something. And I couldn't figure out why I was freezing. I didn't know. So you've heard about the inner critic, right?
Yeah.
And the inner critic says things like, what kinds of things do you usually teach people that the inner critic says?
It'll say you're not enough, you're too fat, you're not smart enough. Oh, you're going to try that? Are you crazy? Mostly voices of things that people have criticized you for and you've taken on as an adult that really limit you from reaching your highest self.
And I love inner critic work. It's very voice oriented, right? Like in your thinking. The inner bully is like this little kid that goes, no, no, no. And it is a visceral response. We can have a response that we don't even realize. Have you ever put anything up, procrastinated, and you have no idea why you're procrastinating?
Sure.
Or oftentimes if we beat ourselves up, we might be fighting. The inner bully might be activated or triggered. We might be fighting. And so I started to see my own inner bully and how active it was and how I felt scared. And I didn't even know there was no voice to it. So it wasn't even as if it was saying, you don't think you're enough. And so it was just like, oh, scared.
Don't do it.
Don't think of it like a younger version of no, bad, no, you, hot, stay away. Like that's almost what it feels like, the inner bully being triggered. And so I started doing a lot more work in it. And then I started seeing how, holy shebingies, I don't know your rules on languaging, so holy shebingies. I've been teaching people how to deal with a toxic relationship, a bully in their lives, a boss that's a bully, a husband that's a bully, friends that are bullies, toxic relationships. And yet what happens in our own bodies when that relationship is present inside and we don't even know it? And it was like my big,
yeah, that's a big aha. So that's, thank you for showing us the difference between the inner critic and the inner bully. And I think, I can definitely feel it. It's like this gut body feeling that, it's like this resistance, and we don't always have a name for it or words for it. But that whole idea of trying something new and not being good at it right away is so resonant for me. Oh my God, it kept me from everything in life. Everything. I mean, that's why I never was a public speaker. And I remember even trying games that people would tell me, try this game Text Twist, where you have to find lots of different words in as quickly as possible. And if I couldn't be great at it right away, I didn't want to try it. I hated checkers because I could lose and then I would throw the board. I mean, this goes back a long time. So it's that perfectionist. And it's interesting also, and this is kind of a side note, but I watched this really silly show called Zimbo's Just Desserts, I think it's called, on Netflix. And it's an Australian show with all these bakers who bake desserts. And whenever you watch these reality shows, you always see a perfectionist. You always see that one person who's so hard on themselves that they end up self-sabotaging. And I was watching this episode last night where this woman calls herself the perfectionist mom, something like that. So even in her way of describing herself, and she talked about, I'm a perfectionist and I jog every day and I have to do this and I have to do that. And she got disqualified within like two shows because she was so in her head and trying to be perfect that she'd end up screwing up. And so that to me is just such an important pivotal thing that people have to really listen to. Like, if you are living your life afraid of trying something new because you can't be great at it right away, you're going to stop yourself from having the life you're meant to have.
I can't even agree more. And you don't see me cooking and baking a lot. It's just not a thing. Sandy always inspires me with meals that she makes, but and I try stuff, but I'm not great at it.
You've gotten really good.
But imagine if your inner bully is activated, triggered, and you're creating a fight, flight, or freeze response within your body, because that's what happens around a toxic relationship or a bully. Well, imagine that chronic busyness or perfectionism is really a way of like fleeing. And when I started realizing, even for me, like if I binge watch TV, or I've had clients who will focus on other people's dramas, it's a way of fleeing. It's flight. Something in you you don't want to look at it. Your big meter's going, no. And even for women, man, I do this a lot when I coach women in fitness. You can't hate your body thin. And I say that in the TEDx talk. But, you look at your thighs and the instant feeling is, no. Like a little kid, like, no. And it's on your own self. And so we create these flight responses, perfectionism, chronically busy, you shopping, binge watching television, and it's really just a way of running away without actually physically. And sometimes some of us run away.
Yeah, physically run away. And then the other response is that freeze response. And oftentimes what I will hear people say, one of my clients is so funny. He's like, I didn't even realize I was freezing until I saw all the things that I wasn't doing. And to him, it was just like, I didn't even know the inner bully was triggered. I just knew I wasn't getting things done. And that's what happens. You get the people who think they have to analyze everything, analysis paralysis, you have to overthink everything. And really, it's like a freezing from having to make a decision. Oh, yeah.
Or choice.
My God. Yeah, it's interesting to look at it as freezing. And I know you're an adrenal expert, and so this adrenal response of freezing is so interesting. And Brene Brown calls it like a numbing. With the busyness is a way of numbing ourselves from being vulnerable, from having a look at life. And but I have a client who was beating herself up because she had a day over the holiday where she was binge eating and binge watching and not exercising. And she, talk about perfectionism and so disciplined all the time. And I said, I think you need to put more of these things into your daily practice, like have that cookie once in a while and eat that chocolate bar, so you don't feel like you're so deprived that you have to do it all at once and then you beat yourself up afterwards. It's having grown up in a house with ice cream always in the freezer and, lots of foods that I didn't feel deprived from. I never had a problem with the binge eating because I would eat what I wanted and I would stop when I wanted to stop. But so many people grow up in these environments where everything is restricted. And so we feel like, oh my God, I have to binge. I have to, and then I feel horrible about it. So it's a spiral that really sucks. So how do people get out of that?
Well, and the other one I'll cover that in a second. The other one is we women. So let's say something isn't going on right in our lives. We'll blame our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
We will blame ourselves and then we will binge eat. So what happens is when your adrenaline is moving, it's either causing you the spike of energy to fight. And actually, let's go through this really quickly. So the first response is freeze. In any safety situation, you'll always freeze to decide, okay, what's the next step? Sometimes we get stuck there. The next step is usually flee. Like if you're in danger, you probably don't want to fight the danger. I'm not going to fight a tiger. So you try to get away. And then the last one is fighting it. You will fight whatever you're facing. And so any number of ways that we deal in life, we can get stuck in the freezing or the fleeing, we get comfortable as like a defense mechanism, part of the way that we deal with stress, drama, whatever is happening in our life. The only antidote to adrenaline is breath. It's relaxing the system. So think about it this way. When you're adrenalized, you're ready for action, or you're ready to flee, or you're just like ready to hold a frozen pose because you don't want the bear to eat you. You have to be able to move that energy through your body. So it's a somatic kind of thing. And I loved earlier when you were talking about, when I mentioned the inner bully, and you said, yeah, I feel it in my gut. It's a body feeling, because it is. It's our brain sending signals to our body to act. So the way that we can calm it down is breath, is a breathing response. Now, the adrenaline also comes out of our adrenal glands, and it's pumping our body full of norepinephrine, epinephrine, all kinds of chemicals, right? You've heard of cortisol. Mm-hmm. To be able to calm our system down, we have to move back into this front frame. One of the best ways that I've come up with it is to count, speak out loud, because when you form sentences, you have to go into the neocortex. Otherwise, the sentences are like, no, yeah, which, who hasn't been in conflict and been like, no? So learning how to calm that system down takes practice. Here's a really crazy one. Humming and singing. Here's why. How many people hum or sing when they're freaked out? It's just, you're not safe. You're in survival. You're not thinking of, mm-hmm. And it starts your vagus nerve. Vagus, like whatever happens in Vegas nerve starts relaxing your parasympathetic nervous system so you can chill out. And that's really all it is. Breathing. I use counting or some kind of process to get my head back into my neocortex. Cool. And also being aware of it, knowing where you tend to go.
So the breathing, I mean, and it kind of reminds me of the beginning of our conversation where we talked about the tools and taking your power back. If you're always in flight, freeze, or fight, you're not in your power. And having that pause, instead of just feeling like you have to fill in every space and you have to immediately respond to something that triggers you. And so you and I talk a lot about triggers when we teach boundaries, because we get triggered. We have that immediate response. And then if you act on it, you're not acting from your highest self. So that breath, that pause, and then pull from the tools that hopefully you'll acquire. But even if you don't have tools, like, we can just take a breath and know that we have choice, that we don't have to be reactive. Right.
And the other thing that I find fascinating, and I know you well enough to deal like this too. So think about it this way. When we're stuck in fight or flight or freeze, we are in survival. I mean, like base survival, right? We're completely self-absorbed. We cannot hear what another person is saying. We cannot think about what they're feeling. We have no empathy because we are stuck. I've got to survive. I've got to make it. I got to make it. We have it's very difficult to connect with somebody like, oh, I can hear what you're saying. Oh my God. Because think about that, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. You're very concerned with your own survival.
Yeah.
You can't think about what's going on outside of you. So it makes us, if you are someone who tends to react a lot from fight, flight, or freeze, you might be called self-absorbed, or you know what I'm saying, but it's completely understandable because you're coming from this place of, I got to survive.
Yeah. Self-protection.
Self-protection.
Yeah. It makes you very unaware of anybody else in the moment. And yeah, it's fascinating. And once you have that awareness, you can change it.
Awareness is the key.
It is. It's where everything starts. So, Theresa, you mentioned your TEDx talk, and we didn't really go into it, but the inner bully is the topic of your TEDx talk. So And what I found, and it's a great talk, and we'll put the link to it in the show notes. You did that talk when you were not feeling well, right? You had just had surgery, or you were about to have surgery, right? Weren't you just recovering? And how'd you get your act together?
I had a lot of inner bully activated. So I had just had a hip replacement. One of the things that happened after that car accident was I had hip injury, and I had a hip replacement. The doctors cleared me on Tuesday. I flew out to do my TED Talk on Thursday. And so while I was prepping and doing all of the pre-planning for it, and Sandy, you also have a great TEDx talk, so you know all of the work that goes into it. I was on painkillers. I was just trying to stay. Yeah. So the talk, and I talk about the pause, the power of an in-power pause, like bringing your power back in the pause in the TED Talk, TEDx talk. But being able to do that, which is literally one of the hardest things for any professional speaker, because TEDx is very demanding and requires you to really step up your game and be so detail oriented. And that's Sandy, not me. When we do our programs together, Sandy is awesome at the details and the tech. And I'm fantastic at the ideas and the support and the helpfulness.
It's a good team.
Yes. But it was a challenge. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. So tell us, you told us a little bit about the talk. If you could tell us some of the highlights of the talk, and yeah, I would love to hear more.
One of the highlights of the talk is that the reason that I believe we're so hard on ourselves, our brains have a neural bias for negativity. What that means is we look for what's unsafe, because what's happy isn't going to kill you. What's unsafe could cause harm. So it makes sense that we're looking for what causes harm. And if you're a woman in a dating relationship or dating, you're always looking for the red flags. It's not like you're simply focused on the green flags. And we teach that, how to be aware of the red flags without focusing solely on those. So we have this bias for negativity. So we want to look out for what could cause harm. The problem is we've turned that into, if I beat myself up, I'm going to get better at something. No. Have you ever met a child who gets better if they're yelled at all the time? If you had a dog or an animal and you yelled at it all the time, does it flourish? Does it thrive? No, it hides under the table and is so afraid of you. And when we have decided as a culture that beating ourselves up is a good idea, we've created that same response. There was a Tufts University study about bullying, and the effects of bullying, health-wise, create this stress in our bodies after 5 minutes of bullying 4 times. 20 minutes of bullying in childhood has effects long into adulthood. We have a higher stress response. So imagine that bullying is happening on the inside.
Wow. And what's interesting is that parenting is a form of bullying. We always think about bullying coming from some bully in the classroom or your bully boss, or, which all exist, but often it starts at home. It starts with somebody saying, you're not good enough, oh, you could do better. And, you don't look good in that, you need to lose 10 pounds. And so much where parents thought that was the right way to parent. It's not, I'm not blaming all parents. Certainly in the parent generation before ours, that was what they were taught, that children should be seen and not heard, and that we have to whip somebody into shape. I remember even a job I had where the boss, I wanted to leave. I hated my job. And the boss said, you'll never get a job as good as this. It's cruel to say things like that to somebody. You hate your work and somebody says, well, this is as good as it's going to get,
And how many people in relationships have done that?
I was thinking the same thing.
Never find someone who loves you like I do.
You'll never find that. And so we get bullied in many different ways, and then we end up bullying ourselves. So definitely watch the TED Talk. It is fantastic. And I found on Ariana Huffington had talked about it, and I sent the link right away to Theresa because she was like, this is one of my favorite TED Talks. And Thrive listed it as one of the top TED Talks of the year. So definitely check it out. There's a standing ovation at the end. People are like, yelling and screaming, and it's great energy, great lessons to take away. So Theresa, you have reinvented yourself. You have gone through crisis and had to really have that come into Jesus moment where like, who am I now? And you have done a beautiful job of creating a new business and writing books and creating courses and doing all kinds of amazing things to help people with their power, both inner and outer. And you're still teaching kickboxing and all kinds of other things.
Self-defense.
Yeah, you haven't stopped in that regard. And you've healed so much. I actually would love to have you tell us a little bit about your healing journey, because, doctors love to say, oh, you can't do this and you'll never do that. And Theresa was just like, I'm not going to listen to any of that. I'm just going to find all these ways to really work on myself. And it's been remarkable. So give us a little glimpse into how you've healed.
Thank you for asking about that. One of the biggest pieces I realized was the power of our mind. We are never broken, but we might be broken open, whether that's life or a brain injury or a traumatic event or an illness. We're broken open. And I've always known the power of the positivity and the power of my mind, but I really saw it when when I was diagnosed as neurologically disabled or told there were certain things I would never do again. And when you have a brain injury, doctors can't tell you what you're going to do. I also had post-concussive syndrome, and they can't tell you if or when it will ever heal. And you have to find this resilience. I had to find this resilience in myself of like, okay, what's next? What's next? I will never give up. And I tried over 40 different healing modalities to see what could help my brain. I never gave up. It just, for me, it wasn't an option. And I've had clients say, well, yeah, but you're special. No, I'm not. Any of us faced with some kind of difficulty have a resilience in us that we don't even know about until it comes to light. I found a company that did brain laser that regrows brain tissue, and it turned out to be the only company worldwide that had this particular patented laser, and it was 13 minutes from my house. If I'd given up, I would never have found that. I was in neurofeedback for over a year, 3 sessions a week. And in neurofeedback, you have a certain level of electricity that your brain is putting out. Most people's brains are putting out, I think it's like 5 to 10 cents. Mine was at $12. So I had an enormous amount of electrical activity going, which was part of the reason I had PTSD, and I had to learn how to calm my system down. What else did I try? Pulsed healing blanket. It's called a pulsed electrical magnetic system, where it helps your body regulate its own electricity and autonomic system. But all of these things I had to look for. They didn't come to me. Again, I knew I wasn't going to give up. I just kept having that faith. Try again. What's new? And I tried so many wacko things that did not work, I will tell you. But for me, the healing journey was realizing that how I thought was more important than anything else I did. The power of our mind, the power of positive thinking, the power of changing our thinking.
Oh.
And I think you did a show with a woman on limiting beliefs.
Yes.
You really have to address your limiting beliefs when you're going against something like this.
Yeah, so true. But, the resilience that you had to keep going and to keep trying, and to also know when to give certain things up. That also takes intuition and being able to trust your gut, trust your body. And it's making me think of Ram Dass, who passed away recently. And one of the things, and I think I talked about it on one of these shows recently, but what was so powerful that I read about him, and I know you're a fan of his work, you've quoted him a few times, was that when he had a stroke and his body got taken away, he thought, this would be the worst thing that could ever happen to me. And he actually saw it as a gift. And he lived with that stroke for over 20 years. And so it was really powerful. Like, he became such an incredible influence to others, really by seeing, okay, that was my ego. I got my ego out of the way. Now what's left? And it's like, oh, I still have all this.
And I feel like the brain injury has been a real gift. For a majority of my life, I have a very high IQ. My brain was my thing, my weapon, my tool. You take that away, what do I have? I have me. I have the essence of me. And it was a gift, a huge gift. And I hope to be able to help others, either if they're dealing with any kind of neurological issues or any illness or, life situation where you feel like your power has been taken away and you're at the effect of whatever's happening, that you still have power. You still have choice. I was never going to let my brain injury win. I was never going to give my power over to, well, I have a brain injury, so this is how it has to happen. Every moment of every day, and sometimes 18 times a day, I had to re-choose myself. I had to re-choose my power.
So for anybody who's listening, we all get a chance to re-choose our power in any moment. And what Theresa is saying right now is so important. And also, some of you may be listening and thinking, how could that be a gift? Like, how could you see this horrible thing as a gift? And there's actually scientific studies, I've just heard this recently, that when you are given something amazing, like somebody who wins the lottery, you're actually miserable, usually. You will find a way to get rid of the money, to ruin your life. There are people who commit suicide, who end relationships, who just cannot deal with this incredible gift of what seems like joy, because it changes their life so much and they have no idea how to deal with it. But the opposite is also true. People who are dealing with the most adverse situations become the most resilient and find the gift in the most horrific things. And you read these stories every day. The prisoner who, there's this court scene where the person who murdered your child, you're creating a relationship with and you're hugging them. You're finding the gift in death, in these horrible, destructive things. And I found the same in my life. When I lost a child, I saw it as a gift. I saw his illness as a gift. I just couldn't see it any other way. And it wasn't like I was trying to be heroic in any way. Like, it didn't even occur to me I must adapt this type of, it really was just this way of seeing it. And I think it's, for me, I look at it as, you're feeling so powerless in this moment where you couldn't do anything about your illness, your brain injury,
your situation,
accident, right? Your situation. And if you can make something good of it, if you can turn it around and teach it to others or give it as a gift to the world, then it makes what happens so much more meaningful, and it just brings meaning to it. I mean, I think that's the way I see it. I mean, what about you?
I see it as a 3 levels. You can be a victim of something that happened to you, and there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, bad things happen. Of course, it's a challenging situation. You can be a victor over it, in which case you have overcome it. You have not let it take your power. And then some people choose to become a visionary. And those are the people who want to make a difference from what they experienced. They want to help others. They want to forward the path. In my TEDx talk, my TED Talk, I talk a lot about the accident and some of the ways it affected me, but making the choice never to let myself be that victim was the first decision I ever made, because that gave all my power away to something external. I didn't know if I was going to be a visionary. I had hoped that I could, but I was definitely going to be a victor. So victim, victor, visionary.
I love that. So, Miss Visionary, what are you creating right now in the world?
I am working on a book about the inner bully, because I do think that it needs to be out there, understanding the conceptuals and the adrenaline and how we can deal with it. So I'm working on a book of the inner bully. I didn't expect Arianna Huffington to be all over it. I wasn't ready after the talk came out. I was like, oh my God, I wasn't prepared.
Get ready.
Yeah, I know. So I'm working on a book for the inner bully. Sandy and I are getting ready to release our boundaries course again. And I have to say, we have seen some magical transformations and teaching. So victim to victor, boundaries, y'all. That is all it is. Because you have to boundary your thinking, you boundary your relationships, you boundary what you do. So we are getting ready to review the boundaries course. I'm also a spokesperson for a brand new self-defense app called eBodyguard. That is a safety app, voice activated safety app. And I'm very proud of that. It's the only one of its kind that can call 911, audio and video record a scene if you should need that for court or for proof of anything. It's the only one of its kind. And yeah, I'm a national spokesperson. I'm a natural spokesperson for that.
That's awesome. Lots of good stuff going on. So it's time now for the lightning round. So Theresa, fill in the blank. I used to think I wasn't blank enough.
I used to think I wasn't right enough.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it wasn't that I was wrong. It was just that everybody else was righter than I was. And if I could work really hard and find the right answer, my life would make sense. Things would make sense. So I wasn't right enough.
Interesting. What was the number one thing holding you back from becoming a woman of value?
Fear of disappointing others.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard of FOMO, fear of missing out. This is that fear when you've let someone else down and it makes you feel all crunchy and yucky inside. And sometimes I didn't want to stand up for myself because I was afraid of disappointing someone else.
So we call that FODO.
FODO.
FODO. What is a mistake you made that taught you an important life lesson?
How much time do we have? Funny, I even now when I make mistakes, I think of them as silly and quirky. So getting ready for this particular interview, I thought it was going to be audio only. So I was in the like this and in the hoodie and like not ready for it. And Sandy said, "No, it says on the thing, it's with audio and video." So I'm getting ready. And Sandy was so gracious because she knows that I screw up all the time and I am okay with it. So what was one mistake? That not being ready for this interview. What did that teach me? How graceful and loving Sandy is and how everything is going to be okay.
It's fine. Not have to be a perfect at everything.
Is that not a big lesson? I know it's probably I should have a bigger life lesson, but
no, it's
a bit like I'm going to screw up.
And what I love is the self-compassion. And, I certainly have learned to have compassion for others. Like, so what if you didn't read it? Like.
I even watched other people. I even read listened to other people's interviews trying to figure out the right answer. And I totally got it wrong.
And it was no big deal. Yeah. So be kind to yourself and others, people who are listening. All right. So what is the best advice you can give to a woman who wants to become more empowered?
Figure out where you're giving your power away.
And stop.
Find a coach, find tools. If it's the economy, my boss, the job, my husband, my kids, if they have power over you, you're going to feel drained, exhausted, frustrated, impatient. You're not going to be in your best self. You're not going to be in your power.
Amen. Could even be Netflix and the food you eat. Right?
Yeah, you're giving it that power. Yes.
Yeah, back to that conversation. So Theresa, this has been an amazing time together. I always love talking to you. And tell us where people can find you. And then I have one more question.
The website is Theresa Byrne, my name.com. The system that I use is called InPower. It's helping people access their inner, inherent, innate, inspired, divine power within themselves so that they can live their best lives. You can look at the TEDx talk. Sandy will put the link in the comments, and look for the boundaries course coming up.
Hey, and the TEDx talk will be on your website as well. And Byrne is Byrne.
And Theresa's Theresa.
Yes. All right, Theresa, the last question.
Dun, 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 dun.
How would you like to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as creating a positive impact, making a difference. Before the accident, I needed it to be millions of people. My goal, my intention was, I have to motivate and inspire over 1 million people. And I say it like that now because on a soul level, I want to make a positive impact on one person. I hope this interview positively impacts, opens up, creates awareness for one person.
Well, I know you have far exceeded your life mission.
Positive impact.
Yes, much positive impact and so much more,
Thank you.
more just by being you, not having to be anything else. So thank you
God.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. I love what you're doing, and thank you for the work you're doing in the world.
If you would like to step more fully into your value, grab a free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Becoming a Woman of Value on my website, thewomanofvalue.com. Just click the link at the top of the homepage. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to click the subscribe button in your listening app. And if there's something in this episode that inspired you, please share it with others, because the more we share these inspirational stories, the more women of value we will have in this world. I'll see you next time.